Welcome, everybody. I see participants are joining, so we'll just give it a few seconds before we get started. Great. It's great to see so many people joining. So welcome to the Refugee Collective Lunch and Learn series. In these sessions, we aim to bring you interesting and timely information. Whether you're a volunteer, community sponsor, resettlement agency staff, a local advocate, or someone who is interested in learning more, we hope that you enjoyed today's session on supporting U.S. ties to become co-sponsors. If you're not familiar, Refugee Welcome Collective, or RWC for short, collaborates with partners to provide in-depth training programs, weekly learning sessions, resources, and on-demand technical assistance for sponsors, resettlement agency staff, refugees paired with sponsors, community and institutional partners, and others to support quality community sponsorship programs across the United States. We can go to the next slide for some quick housekeeping. Just as a reminder, everyone joining us today, this webinar is being recorded and everyone is currently muted. However, if you have any tech issues, please submit a question in the chat or the questions box so we can assist you. And there will definitely be time at the end of this webinar for questions and answers. And additionally, as I mentioned, the presentation, any resources, and a recording will be sent to everyone following today's webinar, which now brings us to our presenter for today. We're very happy, excited, and lucky to be joined by Ruben Rojas. He is a CWS, Church World Service, Global National Program Officer for Community Engagement for the Department of Community Transformation and Belonging. Previously, he was the Resettlement Outreach Southeast Regional Manager for CWS Miami, and he also worked for International Rescue Committee in Miami. Ruben is originally from Miami, Florida, and a son of Cuban exiles. So with that, Ruben, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you for that introduction. So today we're going to talk about U.S. Thai co-sponsorship, and I'm sure you've heard of U.S. ties, and if you haven't, I'm going to go into that now, and I'm sure you've heard of co-sponsorship, but we're going to start talking about U.S. Thai co-sponsorship, how that can look like together. And next slide. All right, so Church World Service is a faith-based organization transforming communities around the globe through just and sustainable responses to hunger, poverty, displacement, and disaster. Next slide. And again, we're going to talk about supporting U.S. ties and how they can become co-sponsors. Next slide. So today's objectives are: what is a U.S. tie? What is co-sponsorship? How can you support a U.S. tie to become a co-sponsor? The benefits of U.S. tie co-sponsorship for U.S. ties, newcomers, sponsor groups, and the community as a whole. And also, we're going to talk about a scenario, what that can look like. So a U.S. tie, by definition, is someone that refers to an individual that has been identified by as the principal applicant for a refugee as a family member or friend who is currently living in the United States. Just in summary, a U.S. tie, again, is a family member or, again, a friend, contact, someone that has submitted an application to bring that family member or friend over. Next slide. And what is a co-sponsor? So a co-sponsor is a group that accepts in a non-legally binding written agreement with a local resettlement office the responsibility to provide and ensure the provision of and the majority of the required resettlement services. So a co-sponsor is normally a group of volunteers, normally 5 volunteers that come together, sign a form, and say that they're going to agree to give at least 8 core services that that a resettlement agency normally gives to or serves for the newcomer. So normally the co-sponsor works with community engagement staff, with case managers in order to give a holistic, I guess, guidance and help for that newcomer. Next. So here we can see an updated timeline of the service provision. I'm not going to go into all the details, but this is something I can also share with you later on. We have the pre-arrival, upon arrival, within 24 hours, within 72 hours, within 7 business days, within 10 business days, within 30, and within 90. And again, for newcomers and U.S. Thai arrivals, the RMP services go up to 90 days. So we can see how this is broken down, and then co-sponsors can sort of guide themselves about what are the responsibilities within the 90 days and what is due when, right? Next slide. So speaking of core services, there are certain core services that case managers are responsible for, and there's other core services that co-sponsors can do. In this case, U.S. Thai co-sponsors. And when I speak about co-sponsors now we're including U.S. Thais. Where U.S. Thais, again, their responsibility or kind of their role was bringing the family member over, and they were expected to support their family member coming in. However, they're not required to. Where the co-sponsor role comes in, where a co-sponsor, again, it's not legally binding. They're also not required, but they voluntarily kind of sign up to do these core services the same way as sort of a U.S. Thai unofficially has signed up to take care of the newcomer. But bringing these two responsibilities together can bring a more holistic approach of working with the office. So some of the core services are arranged safe and sanitary housing, set-up housing, culturally appropriate, ready-to-eat meal, seasonally appropriate clothing, airport pickup, social security application, benefits application, English language training enrollment and employment services, school enrollment, selective service registration, transportation to job interviews training, cultural orientation delivery, cultural orientation assessment, R11 form, service plan, including the family budget, assisting with family reunification and health screening and immunization. So again, these are the core services that that co-sponsors are able to deliver. Again, their case managers can do a lot of other core services, but these are the ones that co-sponsors can do. And according to the cooperative agreement of each year, whenever it changed, this could change a little bit. But again, feel free to reserve any questions or any doubts for local CE staff, for case managers themselves, that they will be up to date with any updates or anything that changes. Next screen. So what is U.S. Thai co-sponsorship? So we spoke of what a U.S. Thai is. We spoke of what co-sponsorship is. So what is U.S. Thai co-sponsorship? It's, again, as I kind of touched upon, it's sort of marrying these two responsibilities. In the past, a U.S. Thai, again, would just sort of sign the form, the family member would come in, and they would sort of participate in what they knew how to. And then a co-sponsor would specifically say, I want to do these core services, at least 8 core services to help the newcomer. Where co-sponsor is normally a group of volunteers that has no previous relation to the newcomer. So the U.S. Thai co-sponsorship is inviting and including U.S. Thai in the whole co-sponsorship experience. Again, this is crucial for fostering a sense of belonging and empowerment in the resettled community. U.S. Thais, they have a lot of them have first-hand experience of navigating life in the United States. So they serve as invaluable guides and mentors for the newcomers, offering cultural insight, language support, and practical assistance. by actively involving U.S. ties in the resettlement process, local resettlement staff can leverage a U.S. tie existing relationships and community connections. But in short, again, many U.S. ties were previous newcomers themselves. So we can consider them as sort of an expert in what resettlement looks like. Then you also have experienced case managers or as experts themselves, and bringing this expertise together to just support the newcomer brings a holistic approach to really empowering the newcomer in every sense. So the U.S. tie is bringing a lot of skills, a lot of knowledge to the table more than ever. But officially signing them up as a co-sponsor, they feel a sense of pride, a sense of empowerment themselves to be able to work with local staff, where the U.S. tie again brings cultural knowledge, their own resources, their own networks, connecting this with the networks of the local office, with the health department, with different nonprofits, with sort of the whole community of networks. Bringing this together for the newcomer is just another level of support for this newcomer. Next. So how can you support a U.S. tie to become a co-sponsor? So as I mentioned, the co-sponsor is normally a co-sponsor team. It's normally at least 5 people. So seeing and growing up with many cases of U.S. ties bringing in family, having family live together, supporting family, and seeing many cases come in through the local office in Miami. I think it's very important to understand that that a U.S. tie co-sponsor team would be very strong if their family, again, every family is going to look a little different of the U.S. tie family, but if the U.S. tie has various family members already in the U.S. and willing to support that one newcomer, you can easily get 5 family members to sign that co-sponsor form together to support the newcomer. If that U.S. tie doesn't have 5 family members that are in the same city or wanting to support, etc., they can also get friends to sign up with them. So that, let's say that there's just a cousin that's bringing in their other cousin in, and that cousin has 4 friends, and it's like, look, we really want to support your cousin coming in. We'll help with some of the rides, we'll help with the public benefits, or we'll help with some of the translation, or we'll help with the airport pickup. That can form another co-sponsor team. Also, another opportunity is that linking a U.S. tie with an existing welcomes team, which a welcome team could be at least 5 people, it could be 4 people. It depends on the welcome team. And bringing a welcome team and uniting them with a U.S. tie could provide a diverse approach or help for the U.S. tie. Also, this welcome team has already expertise in a certain type of welcoming. They can bring a certain type of, let's say, funding or just all-around support that the U.S. tie, as being probably a previous newcomer, doesn't have the access to the same networks and same resources that that welcome team can have. So bringing these two together also offers its own value in a sense. So there's many ways of creating this U.S. tie co-sponsorship. So in summary, and then I'm going to jump into this in more detail, it's important for us to look at the strengths and skills of the U.S. tie, the family of the U.S. tie, the friends of the U.S. tie, the community group, the needs of the newcomer, and organize into support teams to fulfill the needs through empowerment of the newcomer. Next slide. So I'm going to talk about the process of what U.S. tie co-sponsorship can look like. So number one, we want to assess and have the activation of the family strengths. What are the family strengths? Is it translation? Is it the networks? Is it the connection to jobs? The family, again, probably went through the entire newcomer process, knows how difficult that is, but going through that firsthand, they might have already firsthand connections that they built over the years. Empowerment and collaboration. So again, once we assess the family strengths, how do we empower these family strengths and how do we collaborate with, again, the skills and resources that they have, and how do we collaborate the local resettlement office with the U.S. Thai? Next, cultural competence and sensitivity. It's important to recognize that if the family member of the U.S., if the U.S. Thai is participating, they're bringing a lot of cultural knowledge to the table, especially because we know that each culture is very, very different, and the newcomer can already feel a sense of home, being close to the U.S. Thai and integrating the knowledge and the power that we bring, the sort of strengths that we bring from each culture and integrating them to U.S. culture as well. That really builds a huge bridge, especially when it comes to language and translation. But bringing all of this cultural sensitivity into resettlement through a U.S. Thai will really empower the newcomer and the local office. Next, strength-based planning. So again, we're going to go into planning the core services, considering the strengths of the U.S. Thai and the co-sponsor team. We're going to, identify the needs, also build goals, and what are the aspirations of a specific family? What are their expectations, which is a very, very important conversation to have, especially in the beginning, and how can we guide the U.S. Thai co-sponsorship toward the most successful path of resettlement towards self-sufficiency and empowerment. Number 5, support and capacity building. So the local U.S. Resettlement Office will support the U.S. Thai co-sponsor with knowledge, resources, and again, they'll complete the form of delegated core services to make sure they're on the same page. They'll have trainings, there'll be mentorship, and there'll be orientations. Next. Roles and responsibilities. So I previously mentioned this with expectations. It's very important in the beginning, after signing the co-sponsor agreement, that there's a very, very clearly defined roles and responsibilities, not only to make sure that there isn't any confusion when it comes to fulfilling different core services, but also so they can concentrate all of their strengths and all of their focus on completing core services successfully. So again, it makes them understand their commitments, their goals, their motivation, and also it brings a sense of accountability to each core services. Number 7, strength-based problem solving. It's important to approach each barrier and challenge with a strength-based perspective. We want to encourage the family members to draw on their strengths. Anytime there's a challenge, we want to go back to the first assessed strengths from the first steps. We want to go back to those strengths and sort of assess those strengths and bring them back to the table every time there's a sort of problem or challenge, or how to best fulfill each core service. Now we want to move on to recognition and appreciation. Every time there's a core service that's completed, or every time there's a time marker completed, I think it's very, very important to recognize and appreciate each milestone and the contributions of the U.S. Thais, because it is sort of rewarding, I think, not only for the U.S. Thai, but for local staff and the newcomer. So especially for the U.S. Thai, to see the 360, they were resettled at a certain point, and sort of the 360 of giving back from everything they've learned from, and also having local U.S. Resettlement staff learn from the U.S. Thai is all around very, very rewarding. But again, recognizing this and appreciating this during the process is very, very important. Next, flexibility and adaptability. It's important to understand that each refugee dynamic is complex. Each family brings their own stories, brings baggage as well. They bring a very complex story as a US Thai situation. So I think it's very, very important to pay attention to this as volunteers, as sponsor, as local staff, and be very conscious of what are their strengths, but be very careful while approaching the resettlement process. Because again, it's one of the most vulnerable times in the newcomer's life. We want to approach this very carefully, and we want to make sure we're constantly making adjustments to plan and strategies to come up with the better solutions that are necessary to meet the priorities of that specific family. And lastly, evaluation and feedback. How did it go? See what worked well, see what were the challenges, and according to how we have a feedback mechanism, how we have sort of that last meeting with them, local staff and sponsors and volunteers, even US Times themselves, can learn a lot of how the process went and how we can learn in the future. Next. So what are the benefits of US Thai co-sponsorship for US Thais? So US Thais, the majority of them are going to be a former newcomer. So they're in a unique position to share their own personal experiences about life in the United States with newcomers as they navigate unfamiliar systems and cultural differences. They become an ambassador for their new community and a part of the newcomers' growing social capital in a new city. As a co-sponsor, you can empower newcomers to take an active role in shaping their own integration process. Next, as a co-sponsor, you will gain valuable skills and experience areas such as mentoring, advocacy, navigating the local systems in your community. These skills could be highly beneficial for personal and professional growth. And next, as a sponsor, you can also foster cultural exchange and understanding with newcomers. So there's a lot that US Thais can benefit, not only bringing their previous experience, but also fostering new connections, new networks, and for fostering professional growth as well. Next. So what are the benefits of US Thai co-sponsorship for newcomers? For newcomers, they are provided with the best mentorship and resources when you bring your experience and strength to the process. As a sponsor, you may already have a network of cultural resources that help the newcomer feel at home in the community. And again, a US Thai co-sponsor is US Thai, and it could be family and friends, but it can be persons that are not related as well. So bringing all this support to the newcomer just brings another feel of home feel for the newcomer. Next, the newcomer can benefit from US Thai's language support. US Thais generally already know the newcomer's language and help expedite the entire process. Language could be one of the biggest barriers when resettling in the US. And finally, there's no replacement for a mentor that has history, trust, and special relationship. Again, trust is the most important, especially when some newcomers come from countries that the systems are broken. They can't trust the systems in their own country. Coming to a new country, they're still navigating, trying to figure out who they can trust, what systems they can trust, including the local resettlement office. So having a US Thai become a co-sponsor, establish that foundation of trust that really changes the resettlement process, because trust, again, is a foundation to resettling in a new country. Next. So what are the benefits of US Thai co-sponsorship for sponsor groups and the community? The sense of belonging. So belonging is an essential and universal human need, transcending cultural and social boundaries. Again, at Church World Service, our goal is to foster belonging where everyone, regardless of background, feels a sense of connection, worth, equity, and shared purpose. But going back to US co-sponsorship, the sense of belonging, as I mentioned, comes with the foundation of trust. And when we have US ties working with family and friends or working with a group of volunteers or other sponsors, this really brings, and with the local resettlement office, with different partners, with networks, with so many different skills and strengths, I think this can bring a sense of belonging to the community more than ever. Next. So I just want to present a scenario. Being Cuban American and being a son of Cuban exiles, I've seen many families, including family, my own family, friends, community members go through similar processes. So what are the first conversations a Cuban newcomer has with a US tie? Number one, beaches are better in Cuba. They come to Miami and the first thing they say are beaches are better in Cuba. Cuban food is better in Cuba. The Cuban sky is better in Cuba, and Cuba is better in Cuba. So there's a lot of conversations always of the comparative, where they're coming from and where they're going. So we see this as a reflection of the first expectations, the first conversations. But then Walmart is Disneyland. The first time they go into an American supermarket and see how many options they have in the supermarket. Also, every Cuban wants to try every type of food that exists. Every type of fruit that didn't exist in Cuba, every type of cuisine. In the first week or 2 weeks, they're telling their US Thai family member and friends, I want to try this. I'm really curious about this. So they sort of go on a food tour. And then the next thing, of course, is that they want to sign up for gym membership after eating that much. So there's definitely a very enjoyable part of the resettlement process. Actually, a lot of it is enjoyable and extremely rewarding. But again, family welcoming family is just another level of trust, enjoyment, sort of also understanding the cultural sensibilities and what are the expectations, what did they live in their previous countries, sort of like Cuba, and what is it like maybe being in Miami, or if they're going to, let's say, Louisville, Kentucky, or they're going to another city. How is it different and how is it the same, and how are they approaching their first days, their first weeks, and their first months together? Next slide. So talking more about that Cuban that meets Miami, we can talk about US Thai expertise applied in co-sponsorship. So housing, for example, a US Thai can easily say, I have an ex-girlfriend's dad's grandmother that has an efficiency or studio, y son super buena gente, and they're really good people. So again, a US Thai can have the connections, they can have the networks that local resettlement staff may not have. They may have other connections. But again, a US Thai has already normally gone through the resettlement process. And again, they could have a friends, cousins, dog that has connections that the local office doesn't have. And the fact that they're familiar with them, again, establishes trust for that housing piece. Transportation, forget La Escuelita. Forget the little school for driving. I'll take you to a parking lot and teach you how to drive in circles and help you get a license. Again, a US Thai can build that confidence, empower the US Thai when it comes to transportation. And again, for each of these topics like housing and transportation, there's a lot we can dive into. But I'm just going like hitting a few points. For example, getting a license, as we know in the US, is very important, especially for cities that depend on driving a car. So a family member, helping a newcomer learn how to drive, especially if they've never owned a car, they've never been behind a wheel, can really expedite the process of them getting their license, them being able to navigate the city, get to their first job, get to their first interviews, and go from there. Employment. For example, I know Bacardi, Gloria Stefan, and Camila Cabello's dog walker. I'll connect you with them. So again, the US Thai has a huge network of from when they already resettled. They have their friends, their family, and the local resettlement office working with them. So, but their personal connections go to another level again, because they're personal, they're intimate, and it's more likely that a newcomer gets a job when there's someone that recommends them for the job, or it's someone that they trust. Again, we go back to the idea of trust, comfort, familiarity, and again, access to different networks that the local office may not have. And again, they work with the local resettlement office for more resources and networks. The resettlement office has various case managers as experts and constantly looking for different partnerships, constantly working with different departments within the city and within the state that the US Thai may not have access to. But again, bringing these networks together should bring another level of support for the newcomer. Next slide. So you're ready to take the first step. Contact your case manager at the local resettlement office, and they're probably, again, processing the US Thai and having these first conversations. If you're a volunteer, if you're a welcome team, if even you're a US Thai or local staff, start having these conversations with case managers and community engagement staff to start understanding how to have a US Thai sign up to be a co-sponsor and bring that work of welcome for the newcomer. Next slide. Lastly, I just want to mention that there's different resources that you can look at. The US Thai Guide for US Thais or volunteers. It's available in 6 languages. I'm going to drop the link for you to access those. Also for staff, there's a US Thai to co-sponsor toolkit. And there's a 1-page key considerations chart of just the sort of the main steps of what co-sponsorship can look like with a US Thai. I'm going to go ahead and drop that in the chat, and we can use those for reference. Next slide. All right. So any questions? I think I saw a question from Billy in the chat, and then I'll be looking at any other questions that come in. So I'm going to go and dive into the first question. It says, hello, I'm a refugee in South Africa, married with 3 children. I need help to resettle in the US for a safe, warm, and better future for my kids. Can you please assist to get sponsors, please? Sure. So this is a training, and I can help you connect with people that work with applications for if you have family here in the US, or if you're looking for a specific sponsor, I can help connect you. No problem. Do we have any other questions related to US Thai co-sponsorship?
I see another question in the chat here. First question. Realistically, we usually have 2 to 4 weeks notice before a family arrives. How does the Thai recruitment, training, fundraising, and prepare in that time? Or if they gather before and wait for the family to be scheduled, how do you combat burnout and keep group members involved? And if they are joining an existing group, they would likely have missed out on group training and team building, especially if the group has an existing relationship. So how do you manage any conflict that may arise?
These are all really, really good questions, and I'm glad you brought this up, especially when it comes to US Thai dynamics in general. As case managers and CE staff, I think we're very familiar that US Thai, we're not talking about co-sponsorship anymore, just US Thais bringing family over, dynamics can look very, very, very different. There has been some changes to US Thai commitment forms and expectations. US Thais are expected to sort of participate a lot more than they have in the past. And again, each family, like I mentioned before, is very complex, and the level that they participate can look very different. But to be able to prepare US Thais for the newcomer, again, they're normally noticed, they're giving a notice 2 or 4 weeks before. I think it's very helpful for local staff to have a video call with them and sort of introduce the office, introduce the type of services the office gives. And also on the first call, you can also present the idea of co-sponsorship. And if, again, they don't understand how services are given by the office, sort of, say those, answer those first questions, and also answer just in short, sort of one sentence or elevator pitch that US Thai co-sponsorship is sort of agreeing that they're going to work with the office to be able to provide more help and more support and more networks with the expertise that the US Thai already has. So I think that first phone call is the most essential to recruit US Thais. And let's say it's not for co-sponsorship, but that first phone call is sort of already recruiting them or setting those expectations of how the resettlement process is going to look with US Thais and the newcomer. But when it comes to US Thai co-sponsorship, they may not never ever heard of co-sponsorship. Even local staff sometimes was like, oh, how does co-sponsorship work? Is it 4 people or is it 5 people? A lot of people still have a lot of questions, but that first call is the best opportunity to sort of bring them on board, establish trust. And when there's that first opportunity for an in-person meeting, it's the perfect opportunity to say, look, these are what core services are and what they look like. This is what you can do. And again, assess those skills. And hopefully, again, the US Thai and their family or their friends are already involved in these meetings and are already on the same page. And if there are group members that are not family, it is very, very important that they're all in these meetings together, especially if they're not related, that the orientations and a lot of these things are together. You can always create a WhatsApp group. You can create whatever works for the group to make sure that everyone's on the same page. But again, those first steps are very important. I'm going to jump into another question in the same paragraph. How do you combat burnout and keep group members involved? Very, very important. I think that constantly checking up, constant communication, and then again, assessing the US Thai strengths is a big, big factor in combating burnout, because whatever their strength is going to be easy for them to do, and matching this with core services that are already existing. We do know that US Thais may not have the funds or the disposable time because they're previous newcomers. They may be still resettling themselves, or they may have been in the US for many years, that they're a bit more stable. But we do need to take this into consideration to not create burnout. So we need to make sure that local staff is aware of what a US Thai can and cannot do, and sort of not push them too far. See what their strengths are, see what they can do, and work collaboratively and bring all the resources and all the strengths that the local US Thai has. Again, we're not only empowering newcomers, we're empowering US Thais as well. Let me see if I'm missing anything.
We do have some hands up, so certainly
Okay.
in the chat, but people are certainly encouraged to come off mute. I see I think Sarah has a hand up.
Hi, I'm Sarah Farfurnick. I work in the state refugee office in North Carolina, and I have a previous experience working on the ground with refugee agency providers. So I actually have it's like a two-part question, but was asking if there's going to be specific training for US Thais that do want to be part of the co-sponsorship. And then the other part of my question is, earlier on, you had mentioned the importance of communication, and this part could go with the training, but what I've seen on the ground is that US Thais at times can be very demanding. It can be very it can really burden the staff members, because not only can they be demanding, but they may have their own ideas about what their priorities are or how things should be managed versus, what the refugee service providers need to do. So, for example, accepting any job is really important to help them get on the ground. And so the refugee service, the U.S. Thai may say no, just refuse this job or refuse that, and so that has been a really big complication on the ground. So just asking about that.
Absolutely, absolutely. To answer your question about training, we are the first resettlement agency that we know of that is introducing or piloting U.S. Thai co-sponsorship. So you're attending the first the first sort of training about just introducing U.S. Thai co-sponsorship. Right now, what we have are the resources that I shared. There's the US Thai toolkit, there's a US Thai guide in 6 languages, and there's also the key considerations. But we are looking toward creating more trainings. You can also contact me for any questions or updates for any other trainings. I'll put my email in the chat. And we are looking to expand the work of not only co-sponsorship, but US Thai co-sponsorship. And I know that since this is sort of, it's new and it's not new because co-sponsorship has existed and so have involvement with US Thais. But bringing these things together and having them officially sign on is the kind of new factor. We're all going to be learning in the process and in this sense. So feel free to access those resources or feel free to email me. I'm going to put my name in the chat as well. Feel free to email me and I can send you any other trainings that that pop up. Also having to do with US Thai expectations and sort of the challenges they bring to the table. I know how difficult, I think we have sort of those volunteers and co-sponsors that go rogue, right? That sometimes they give sort of the office a hard time because they are expecting a lot more from case managers. They're expecting sort of different world from what local offices can do. And US Thais could sort of bring even more of a challenge in the sense that they have even more expectations because a lot of them were previous newcomers. Their own resettlement experience may have been very, very different from what the newcomer is going through now. And they may have more benefits, they may have less benefits. Again, each newcomer, each family is very, very different. And I think it's very important once we present US Thai co-sponsorship as staff, I think it's very important to really measure, does co-sponsorship truly make sense for this family? There's been different levels of US Thai involvement that I've seen personally, in the sense that a US Thai has never answered the phone, even though all the documents were signed, or the address was an address non-existent, or the US Thai is absolutely involved in every part, in every event that the local office has bring. So we have a large spectrum of expectations and involvement from US Thais. And I think it's important that each local RA really identifies, does the US Thai understand the services that are allotted, and or is it a good fit for them to work with the US as a US co-sponsor? And some US Thais may be a lot more independent, and that is okay. That is okay. And some US Thais may want to work with case managers and CE staff and sort of expand their network and community. But given there's a lot of US Thais that are maybe still working 2 jobs, so having issues with housing, and maybe they're just not ready for this experience. And again, that is okay. But again, it's important for local staff to identify this early on and say, hey, these are our services. This is US Thai co-sponsorship. What do you understand? What are your strengths? And what are you able to do? And if they're not able to do it, that is absolutely okay as well.
I see Keith also has a hand up.
Yep. So Keith Radamus, I'm the Circle Welcome Manager here at Lutheran Services, Florida and Orlando. So this is, of course, right up my alley here. I guess my question I have put in the chat, see it, but basically, have you been doing this, the US Thai, have you been doing it a while? What's the success rate? And it's a great idea just to think about the fact that just getting normal co-sponsor groups has been very challenging to try to get co-sponsor groups in general. I don't know if you have a recommendation or of how to maybe expand that, but also how would that work with the US Thai being so closely attached to that person as far as, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, as far as you know, sort of complying with the commitment to be a co-sponsor, making sure like number one, things like don't, well, we were trained through Global Refuge, you don't give the co-sponsors money, stuff like don't give, not the co-sponsor, don't give the families money, extra money, make sure it comes from the office, make sure it comes through us, which things like that. How would that work with the US Thai? Because of course, the first thing, if they're real tight and they're close to them, the first thing they're going to want to do is reach out. And I know that when we do co-sponsor trainings, that's one of the big things we tell people. Remember, we're trying to teach self-sufficiency. So if you're really true to that motto and to help doing that, then don't hold back. But I don't know how that would work with a US Thai, especially if it's a family member. Sometimes, so I don't know if that question, I didn't mean to jumble it around, but I was just curious of those couple things.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're bringing this up because we already know how difficult or challenging co-sponsorship can be. And we know how challenging US-Thai relations can be as well. And it's bringing both of these challenges into one. Again, it's also both the opportunities of US-Thai relations and co-sponsorship together. Right now, again, we don't have numbers of successful because this is very new. No resettlement agency that I know of, or no one has done it yet. But this is, again, an opportunity to bring a lot of the resources, a lot of the skills, a lot of buy-in from the US Thai into the process, where normally, or not normally, sometimes US Thai can, again, come with their own expectations, present challenges, even co-sponsors that are not, they have their own set of expectations or manage finances differently. They don't understand the idea of self-sufficiency. There's a lot of training that is needed. But again, this is an opportunity to sort of bring a US Thai in for co-sponsorship. Will it be easy? No. Again, I won't say no. It depends on the family, as I mentioned before, and really, I guess, looking at each family, looking at each dynamic, and see how it makes sense or it doesn't make sense with co-sponsorship, I think can really help us try this in our local offices. But you're absolutely right. There's a lot of important conversations that has to do with finances, housing. Again, there's a comment that I read quickly about co-signing lease agreements. That's an opportunity, for example, where let's say a newcomer without a US Thai, it's very difficult for them to get housing. The family member can co-sign for them to get housing, and that can help solve part of our housing issues. But for a lot of those complex challenges, in the US Thai co-sponsorship toolkit, I presented various scenarios with various challenges. I sort of presented solutions as well. I also cover cultural sensitivity, empowerment, and trying to avoid too much mentorship to make sure that the newcomer is self-sufficient. But I do agree with you, Keith, that in the sense that if co-sponsors sort of sometimes get too involved or have challenges knowing what to expect or what to do in co-sponsorship, with a US Thai being closer to the newcomer, it could be challenging because they have a sense of trust between themselves, separated from the local office. But we do want to bring this together, even without co-sponsorship. the US Thai trust in the local RA is essential. So we can see this as opportunity and bringing more trust and bringing more involvement, introducing a US Thai, let's say, to a nonprofit partner or to a company, and getting them more involved can actually bring more buy-in. They're like, okay, like the local RA is not working against me. They're helping us and they're connecting us. And sometimes I think a lot of the challenges are presented because there is a disconnect with the US Thai and local RA sort of dynamic. Hopefully this bridges the disconnect in a sense. It's like, hey, let's start working together. But when you're working together, there needs to be a lot of important conversations to be had. And either way should be had with or without co-sponsorship.
So I think we have 7 minutes max. So if anyone else has any questions they'd like to ask, please feel free. But I think there might be a few left in the chat here. I think he spoke a little bit to this, but there was a question from Ashley about an incident twice where the US Thai demands that the local RA co-sign a lease. US Thai is not willing to co-sign for the client. It's not their office policy to do that, but there's another office that does have that policy. So any recommendations on that? So I don't know if that's an opportunity to dig a little more deeper into the co-signing topic.
Right. Actually, I saw the co-signing
Okay.
kind of comment, and I touched a little bit upon it. But when it comes to, let's say, let me read it really quick. We don't have a co-sponsor agreement with the US Thai, but we're demanding our office to co-sign lease agreements. And I can see the opportunity in the future to set expectations. Yeah, absolutely. Again, it was mentioned, US Thais can be very, very demanding if they had their own resettlement experience and they're seeing a sort of different resettlement experience for the newcomer and what they can look like. And again, each conversation could be very different. And as we approach this, again, I work with the CWS offices nationally. We're going to get a lot of different scenarios and a lot of different cases of what works and doesn't work. So I'll probably be following up with another presentation with many scenarios. I gave a fun sort of funny scenario just to introduce, but I think we're going to have a lot of real world experience of how US Thai co-sponsorship can work. But again, identifying if co-sponsorship is truly a good fit, I think is the first steps. And also having the US Thai understand, even though many things may not fulfill their expectations, have a to-go list of all the resources and opportunities and partnerships and events, maybe a one-pager of all the resources that a local office can provide, not only to the newcomer, but to the US Thai to the forefront. Again, we don't only want to see the skills and strengths that US Thai has. We also, as a local RA, want to bring all of that to the forefront and say, hey, I know these are your expectations. However, we have all of this. And community engagement fulfills a lot of the gaps that sometimes we have in funding or we have with certain programs. We have an entire community helping the local RA. We have an entire community hopefully helping also the US Thai and the newcomer. And again, to at the end build this sense of belonging where we're all exchanging, we're all working together. But yes, working together, it's gonna present challenges and bumps in the road. I also have a challenging conversations resource that kind of goes through all different types of challenging conversations and how to approach this.
Wonderful. So I see Emily has her hand up. Emily, you can go ahead and.
Thank you. Hi, yes. So I'm Emily, Community Engagement Specialist with Lutheran Social Services of the National Capital Area, joining from Baltimore, Maryland. And I know there have been times that I've seen where US Ties get involved very deeply, even if it's not like in a co-sponsor capacity. So I guess I'm wondering, at what point does it have, not that it has to, but like at what point is it helpful to become like an official co-sponsorship? Like if they say, no, I don't want to co-sponsor, but they're still helping with a lot of things, like how to kind of navigate that, desire to be present and be helping of the family of the newcomer, and like where that crosses over into like a official quote unquote co-sponsorship, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. Actually, that's where the idea came from. Looking at different co-sponsorship throughout the network and US-Thai relations as well, we realized that a lot of US Thais were already doing a lot of the core services that co-sponsors do. They're sort of just doing it independently on their own, providing transportation or translation services. They're already doing everything a co-sponsor sort of does, but some of them sort of isolate sometimes. But again, like you said, they're so involved that it's funny that there was that gap that the conversation was not had. And it's simply approaching now that we understand that they can be a co-sponsor. And if you see that they're kind of like on board, they're fully involved, sort of presenting that as like, just like I said, it's like, look, you're already doing so many incredible things. If you're interested, you can actually be an official co-sponsor, where the benefits of co-sponsorship is that we're going to bring a lot more resources of working directly with the case managers and CE staff, and whatever other resources you have. When the benefit of, again, I mentioned the benefits before, but the benefit of being a US a co-sponsor is that there's so many trainings and guidances for co-sponsorship that can be brought to the US Thai, which wasn't brought in the past. So having that simple conversation is like, hey, you're doing such an incredible job. We're learning so much from you. Why don't you become a co-sponsor with us? Like we would love to continue learning from you and also provide you with more resources.
All right. I think we got 2 minutes left. I did see one quick question if you're able to address in less than a minute, Ruben, but it was asking about how do you track the activities of a US Thai?
Sure. We also have a resource of sort of a weekly guide for co-sponsorship. And again, anything that's co-sponsorship can be applied to US Thai co-sponsorship. And it sort of like has different forms of how to track core services, how to track timelines. I also provided the timeline provision. We have a lot of resources for that, but I think it's really important to guide ourselves by the core services and deadlines and have at least weekly follow-ups. You need them. And honestly, in 2 or 3 days, a lot of things can change, especially in family dynamics. Again, many things, or they can have a conversation that all of a sudden they feel uncomfortable with each other, or there can be a lot of things brought up, especially in the most vulnerable beginning of the 90 days. Or there's a lot, again, I don't want to present everything as challenges, but a lot of opportunities, a lot of good things. So I would say at the very least, follow up every week and see what has been able to be done, not done. And if they're not able to fulfill core service that they said they could, that's okay too, and see how to navigate that. But constant touch points are everything.
Great. Well, we're right at time, and I just want to again thank our presenter today for a very thoughtful and engaging presentation. And I think we'll have to do this again when we have more scenarios to learn more about the work.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we would all love to hear from you. We have the slide here with the QR code, so we'd love to get your feedback on today's Lunch and Learn, hear your suggestions for future ones. So we just ask if you could all take a moment to just complete this very short survey. Your input is really appreciated, and you can also click on the link as well if you prefer not to use the QR code. And as I mentioned, you will all receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording of today's Lunch and Learn, and as well as the resources that Ruben referenced. So again, on behalf of Refugee Welcome Collective, thank you for joining us, and have a great rest of your week. Thank you.
Thank you.